So the opposition's job, of course, is to oppose. They want Justin Trudeau to take a harder line on China, but they also want to build a pipeline to sell oil to China. What about spending? They're worried about the deficit and they're worried about fraud, but they insist they want programs expanded. So what does it all mean? To clarify that and why Parliament needs to sit more frequently, not less frequently, we're joined now by the opposition leader, Andrew Scheer. Mr. Scheer, good to see you, sir, and I hope you and the family are doing well. Let's start with China. You say the government has a policy of appeasement. Jason Kenney wants a, quote, great reckoning with China. You want a harder stance. Fair enough. I appreciate that. But you also want us to build pipelines to sell oil to China. If they're so bad, why do you want to sell oil to them and take a harder line? Can you reconcile that for me?
Well, first of all, building a pipeline to open up Asian markets includes Japan, India, so many countries in the region, Korea, that will obviously be better off for Canadian energy workers and for all Canadians. We believe that there are steps that we can take to show China that we're serious. Obviously, a trading relationship is important, and there are many jobs here in Canada that depend on goods and services going back and forth. But for heaven's sake, we could start with some easy steps like pulling the funding for the Asian Infrastructure Bank. It makes no sense why Canadian tax dollars should have to go to a China-run development bank to build roads and bridges in other countries to advance the interests of the PRC.
I appreciate that, that there are real issues about, some call our soft diplomacy, or it's been called suck-up diplomacy, and I appreciate all that. But again, okay, but Mr. Scheer, China's our second biggest export market there. They are going to be the second, maybe the first largest economy in a matter of a decade. Would you be comfortable selling oil to China? And if so, how do you, again, I'm just trying to figure out, if you're going to take a tough stance, you say, let's just stop selling our oil to China, because can you have it both ways?
Well, I've never said we should stop selling our oil to China. I've said we should stop sending Canadian tax dollars to the Asian Infrastructure Bank. I've said that we should take a harder line when they illegally detain 2 Canadian citizens. I mean, keep in mind, there are 2 Canadian citizens being held illegally, and this government has done literally nothing. China has put blocks on our exports of canola. Again, this Liberal government did nothing. I've always believed that when you take money from another country, you're better off. You know, when we can sell something and take money, the money goes from the Chinese economy to the Canadian economy, that's good for Canada. The Conservatives' energy policy is not just about getting pipelines built to the West Coast so that we can open up markets in Asian countries, including Japan, including India. I met with Prime Minister Modi and spoke about our party's desire to be able to supply India with ethically sourced Canadian energy. We also want to build pipelines to Eastern Canada so that we can stop importing oil for Saudi Arabia. So when we stop sending consumer dollars to other countries, and we start getting consumer dollars from those countries into Canada, that strengthens Canada. So I believe we can show China that there are consequences for illegally detaining our citizens and pushing us around, while at the same time ensuring that our economy can grow.
On the deficit, you and your party have criticized the government for high deficit levels. They could reach record levels, closing in on $300 billion this year alone. The PBO earlier said even 252. We're well past that. But you also want to expand eligibility to some programs. So can you clarify that? Do you want less spending on programs to decrease the deficit, or do you want more spending on programs that would expand the deficit?
Well, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify this, Evan, because there really are 2 tracks here. One is the temporary response to the pandemic. We know that that having a lockdown and telling businesses that they can't open is not normal in Canada, not something that is likely to go on well into the future. We're hoping that that component ends as quickly as possible. There's the normal government spending, you know, what the government was normally spending on their fiscal track before the pandemic hit, had us going into the red, tens of billions of dollars a year. Now added into that are these extraordinary measures, which we by and large support, and as you point out, believe that they should be more flexible. And if you allow, for example, people to earn more than $1, more than $1,000 without losing their entire benefit, we could have a situation where that's actually better for people, it's better for the economy, it's better for governments. what we're saying is that this is not, we can't end this pandemic and go back to the billions and billions of dollars worth of deficits the Liberals were racking up, giving $50 million to MasterCard, $12 million to Loblaws. We need to get back on track because this money comes from somewhere. Right now, the Bank of Canada is literally just printing it out of thin air. Right. That's going to have massive consequences.
Well, I know, but we're well,
to be fair, doing that for well into the future.
Yeah, the deficit before was about $19.8 billion. To be fair, that's still a low debt to GDP ratio. That's a different world there. The new normal is we're going to have deficits of about $300 billion. Now, you focused a lot of energy on claiming that hundreds of thousands of Canadians who are using the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, $2,000 a month, are defrauding the system. There's got 7.5 million Canadians are using it. We've got record unemployment. The language you've used a lot, you know, some programs that you want to expand, you said, are tranquilizing the desire for students to work, not incentivizing them. And I appreciate you say you want to expand the eligibility, but do you regret a language that you've constantly talked about, defrauding, tranquilizing, that sounds like you're stigmatizing people who frankly need help in the biggest economic crisis in a century?
Well, I reject that utterly, Evan, and you well know, you and I have spoken about this. I have never conflated the two. There are millions of Canadians who legitimately need the help, and Conservatives have supported. In fact, we've improved upon the government programs to get those people who have been affected through no fault of their own through this crisis. What we have been saying is that when we are talking about so much, yes, we understand the need to move quickly, but when we hear evidence, when we hear reports that this government is telling people to ignore fraud, to ignore the types of red flags that would indicate that some people are receiving this benefit without qualifying, or people have been convicted of fraud in the past, we rightly ask the tough questions whether or not the governments have put in the proper safeguards, because this government is telling some people that they don't qualify. They're telling owner-operators that they don't qualify for help. They're telling small business owners that they don't qualify for help if they don't have a bank account. So, well, we believe that you can't, on the one hand, tell a whole bunch of people who, through no fault of their own, are in a great deal of difficulty, that they're not going to receive help. Then, on the other hand, turn a blind eye to red flags and things that the public service is warning. We believe you can do both. Just in the spirit of,
okay, on the spirit, just to be fair, the government's saying they're not turning a blind eye. They flagged them. They're going to get, the CRA has their SIN numbers, and if there's fraud, they say they will get them on the back end. Whether they do or not, we got to check. Just real quick, you've been very tough on the public health officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, for being too trusting of the WHO. She's now recommending we should all wear a mask. Will you follow her advice and wear a mask?
You know, as more information becomes available, as it becomes more widely accepted that these types of measures do help limit the spread, I will be taking those types of extra steps as well.
You will, okay. Because I heard a report today that you said you'd wear a mask if Parliament comes back. First of all, was that accurate? And were you using public safety like a mask as a political bargaining chip?
No, we were trying to make the point throughout the week that our priority is to make sure the House of Commons is sitting. We will cooperate with whatever the other parties feel is necessary to make their members feel more safe and more secure. We are interested in finding that right balance so that we can meet and do our jobs. And what the impression was I was trying to convey was if that is something that helps facilitate other members of other parties agreeing with our position at the House of Commons, we'll say, of course, that is something that I would be prepared to do. That is our focus.
So that was not a political chip. Okay, so I want to clarify. You're not saying I'll only wear a mask if you call it back. You're saying if you're wearing a mask means we can be safe and you call it back, I'll wear a mask. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that I will take whatever steps the House administration and other people that are trying to find out how best we can get the House of Commons to have some kind of a responsible work plan going forward. That of course I would do that. So it was not meant to be dependent on one or the other. I'm perfectly willing to take those types of measures.
Some are calling for Dr. Theresa Tam to be removed. Do you think she should be removed?
I think Justin Trudeau needs to be held responsible for his decisions, and I don't like the idea of finding a scapegoat. The buck stops with him. My job is to hold him accountable for his decisions. His decision to ignore expert advice telling us that we should close our borders earlier. His decision to dump millions of pieces of personal protective equipment. I'm here to hold him Justin Trudeau to account, and that's what I'm going to continue to do.
All right, Mr. Scheer, always good to see you, and we'll find out if what Parliament does over the summer. Interesting debates going on there. Andrew Scheer, always good to have you on the program. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Adam.